Good evening. I'm going to call this special meeting of July 26, 2022 to order. I'd like to thank our live simultaneous Spanish interpreters for joining us tonight. We are also, as always, live streaming our meeting, which you can connect to from the Jeffco website. Before we do roll call, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please. Ms. Lang.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Barker? Here. Ms. Reed?
Here.
Ms. Schooley?
Here.
Dr. Varda?
Here.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's meeting agenda?
I move that we accept the agenda for the July 26th, 2022 meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for the special meeting of July 26th, 2022 as presented. Roll call, please, Ms. Lang.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Ms. Schooley?
Yes.
Dr. Varda?
Yes.
All right, we move on to our first agenda item, which is a resolution regarding the negotiated agreement for Jeffco Education Support Professionals Association, JESPA. The resolution would have some amendments to our collective bargaining agreements with JESPA. Those amendments include substantial additional investment and professional development opportunities for classified staff, as well as pay increases for some of our lowest earners. Is there a motion on this agenda?
I move to approve the I move to approve the JESPA agreement and resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Ms. Parker.
I would just like to say that I did watch a lot of the negotiations that went on, and I am so happy that we were able to come to an agreement before the school ended. I appreciate all the hard work on the negotiators on both sides of the table. I have always said that adequately compensating our staff and respecting them is a high priority for me, so I'm glad that we were able to get that issue covered to an agreement. And also, we've gotten a lot of emails from parents, and also we had presentations in front of the school board about the healthy lunches and the food and nutrition program, and I was very glad to see that there was a lot of discussion in that and agreement in that area, and that they're going to have a pilot program to work on that. So this is a real win, I think, for us as a district.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Other discussion items, board? Okay. Hearing none, it has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution regarding the negotiated agreement for JESPA. Roll call, please, Ms. Lang.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Ms. Schooley?
Yes.
Dr. Varda?
Yes.
Great. Thank you all. We move on to talk about dual representation agreement. So a group of law firms representing hundreds of school districts and claims against Jewel has approached Jeffco Public Schools about joining the case, a multi-district litigation set up in San Francisco. All school district cases against e-cigarette manufacturer Juul are consolidated there under the supervision of a single federal judge. Participating districts must complete a plaintiff questionnaire, but external counsel does not anticipate being subject to formal discovery. The agreement proposes a contingent fee structure in which the districts will bear no out-of-pocket costs. Rather, attorneys' fees and costs would be deducted from any award or settlement. Nationally, there are over 1,200 school districts that have already joined. Is there a motion on this agenda item?
I move to approve the district's participation in the litigation against Juul.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
I had a real quick question that I raised at the meeting last week. and that was whether or not Jefferson County as a district has any kind of data or information that would help me understand why we are taking this step forward. I understand the impact on children. I understand the impact on families. I'm just wanting to understand what that impact has been on our schools in terms of extra security. Has there been greater need of vigilance in terms of watching kids in hallways? I just want to understand what our experience has been and why we are stepping into this.
Yes, so thank you, Director Miller. We do have some data that we can provide, and we can work on that for the board if that's of interest. And I believe that is some of the same data that we would be providing to this organization and group if the board were to approve this to move forward. And I'll just look to Ms. Tolleson and see if she has anything that she'd like to add to what I've said.
Okay, there I am. Thank you. Madam President and Ms. Miller, in inquiring, just as a threshold, I think this has been one of the struggles for all of the plaintiff school district participants, is because it's difficult to monetize how it is impacted, but we've got data from both discipline, nursing screenings. Right now we're looking at, as I understand it, piloting vape detectors, folks monitoring bathrooms, sort of the intangible drain on the system that has been associated with the youth pandemic, so of vaping. So that's really been the legal theory that they've been pursuing in the case, and they're pulling together data from both us and every participating district. So it's not the level of detail I'm sure you'd like. But.
Ms. Miller, did you have any follow-up questions or comments before I turn out to see if other board members have questions?
I just want to make sure that, this is from what I understand, a sizable case. Like you said, a number of school districts have stepped forward and wanted to be participants in this. And then if there is an award, the fee, of course, would be paid from that award. I want to understand if there is staff requirements, timing, et cetera, that we'd have to be able to pay for in advance. Or that we'd have to incur those costs only to wait to be compensated or reimbursed after a long process. And just wanting to understand what that obligation might look like, if we've even quantified that at all.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. That's a great question. The Plaintiffs' Council estimates that their plaintiff questionnaire, which is sort of their collection data point, is somewhere between 5 and 10 hours worth of work for whoever's saddled with doing some of that gathering. I have shared that questionnaire with some cabinet level staff to ensure that folks that they could absorb the burden of that data collection without it being a substantial drain or require any out of pocket. And so it looks like something we can absorb with existing staff.
Great. Did you have a question, Ms. Reed?
Actually, I just wanted to say why I really support this, and that is that I was still in the classroom at the front edge of this wave, and I know that I had students missing school because they were suspended, because they had the Juul and they were using it at school. And it can be very difficult to try to get young adults to see the long-term impacts of their decisions. So I know that there needs to be some accountability to vaping companies because it is impacting our students. It erodes the school culture. We had students who were using them in class because they felt like they could get away with that. You can do it subtly enough, but then the other students know that it's happening, and it undermines the respect for the teacher. It undermines respect for what's happening in the classroom itself. There are so many costs to this that may not be immediately something that you can immediately monetize, but that are very real.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Parker?
I also would like to say that the questionnaire that comes with this litigation, I think could be really helpful for us as a district anyway, even if we were not being part of this effort. It's got a lot of information on the use of Juul and cigarettes and other drugs, alcohol, etc. And I think it would be helpful for us as a district to have that kind of survey of our district.
Any other comments or questions before we move to a vote? Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve Jeffco Public Schools joining a multi-district litigation against e-cigarette manufacturer Juul. Roll call, please. Ms. Lang.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you for the context, Director Reed. Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Ms. Schooley?
Yes.
Dr. Varda?
Yes.
Great. We are cooking with grease. Our next agenda item is appointments to the District Accountability Committee, otherwise known as DAC. In accordance with Board Governance Policy GP13 committee structure, the Board of Education approves membership to the District Accountability Committee. When the board approved appointments as a consent agenda item on June 8th, the attachment did not clearly identify the final appointees. A yes vote approves the corrected attachment and final appointees to the District Accountability Committee. Through March 11th to April 11th, 2022, an online application form was available to individuals interested in serving on the DAC, and applicants were provided an opportunity to meet individually with board members on May 25th. The board received 29 applications to serve on DAC, which were discussed at the earlier study session when direction was given for appointments confirmed through this agenda item. Appointments are made for 2-year terms unless directed otherwise by the Board of Education. Is there a motion on this agenda item?
I move to approve the District Accountability Committee appointments as presented on board docs with the addition of Joel Newton as a Jefferson Articulation Area representative.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yeah, sorry. Director Parker.
I have a question about the vacant positions. Is that something that just is vacant until we vote on the whole list again, or can they be filled in the interim?
My understanding is that we can fill them as we find participants who may want to join the DAC, and we would obviously inform the board of that when it does occur.
My experience being a participant on DAC prior to board service was that there was a sort of consistent effort to recruit individuals, community members, parents, et cetera, from particularly articulation areas where there's not as much representation, so that's an ongoing effort of engagement. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Miller, do you have any? I can't see you, so.
Sorry. No, I echo the request for Joel. He did reach out to us and ask to be considered, and he has served on the DAC in the past, and I think his voice is critical as we are moving forward with a lot of the work we have going on this year. So I appreciate Director Reed's recommendation, and I would like to echo that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, it has been moved and seconded to approve the corrected attachment and final appointees to the District Accountability Committee, including Joel Newton as the Jefferson Area Articulation Rep. Roll call, please.
Miller?
Yes?
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Ms. Schooley?
Yes.
Dr. Varda?
Yes.
All right, thank you all. Our final agenda item of this evening is a study session for our Regional Opportunities for Thriving Schools initiative, and we will welcome our colleagues up to the table. The board tasked the superintendent with creating an information profile for all of our elementary schools based on a criteria created through the board's work for a thriving school. That is publicly available on the front page of the district's website for any community member or individual to be able to review. I want to make a mention that this evening for our study session, we'll be going through the criteria and some of the elements included in that dashboard. We will also have a special meeting on August 25th. I'm sure some of these things will be reviewed in the timeline, but because our community members, a lot of them are very interested in this topic, I want to just make sure the information is out there. The meeting on August 25th will include a superintendent's recommendations for closures and consolidations. We'll have a study session then on September 7th, and then a board meeting on September 15th. There will be public comments, opportunities for individuals. There is not. This is a special meeting, so I wanted to make clear that there will be ample opportunities for community voice to be heard throughout this process. With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Verlew and Dr. Kim, Superintendent Dorlin. That's where we're going.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, President Schooley. We are going to host a conversation for you this evening with the purpose of allowing the board to have conversation about the data that was released per your policy FCB at the end of June. We felt that it was important for the board to have time together for our public also in a public setting to be able to discuss the data. It's a robust set of data, as you have seen. I want to take a moment before we begin the presentation and thank a team of many district staff who worked tirelessly from your May meeting. If you'll recall, in your May meeting, the board requested, as part of your policy revisions, that we provide you the data required by that policy for all of our elementary schools. It was a monumental effort, and many, many district leaders worked tirelessly for about 5 or 6 weeks to provide what is now linked on the front page of our district website. You know, in one of your new values that the board has set for our district, we talk about integrity, and we talk about acting with integrity, creating honesty, trust, responsibility, and a spirit of transparency. And that it's a constant commitment to do the right thing for our students, staff, families, and community. And I just want to highlight that I am proud of the work we've done with the dashboard, because I do think it aligns with this value, especially in the definition of a spirit of transparency. We want our public to be able to see the information we have as we're trying to work through and make recommendations to you in this process. For our listening public, Regional Opportunities for Thriving Schools is an initiative to respond to the board's request for a comprehensive plan to ensure thriving schools that support extraordinary experiences for all students across the district. We have, in the last 2 spring seasons, had to conduct emergency closures for 2 different elementary schools. The board made it very clear this spring, when we had to close Fitzmaurice given extreme declines in enrollment, that we did not want to do emergency closures anymore, that we needed to be more respectful of our communities and provide a longer runway and more supports for our students, our families, and our staff to take care of them as we make these difficult decisions. The outcome of this initiative, Regional Opportunities for Thriving Schools, will be school consolidation. And it will result in fewer but more robustly resourced schools, providing for a more extraordinary experience for our students. We have schools right now, let me be really clear. I have confidence that we have schools that are taking good care of our students. We have incredible staff who love our students, who are responsive to their families every day, and who show up trying to do their best work in the interest of students. What we also have, though, are resources that are spread so thinly across so many sites. And with the declining enrollment that began in around about 2017 and was exacerbated by the pandemic, we have schools who are also having to make very difficult decisions about what to give up in order to just staff classrooms. And oftentimes, those decisions result in less opportunity for students to have art, music, and PE, less opportunity for students to have electives that they are really interested in. And so we've got to address this. And I am grateful to the board for your direction to ask me for a comprehensive plan and not just addressing issues as they emerge as emergencies. It's going to be difficult for all of us. This is not going to be easy work. This is some of the most difficult work that any district takes on. And I want you to know that it is important to me and our cabinet team that we do it with intention, with grace, with presence, and support for our families and staff. And as I said before, it will not be easy, but we are committed to doing it in a way where we are side by side with people in the difficult work. And so with that opening, I will now hand it over to Lisa Relu.
Thank you to the board for prioritizing this very important discussion. Tonight, we're going to review some information that we have presented to you before, just as a reminder of the importance of the work that we have ahead of us. However, before we get into the presentation, there are some people that I would like to recognize who are here tonight, and some of them are here, but that were instrumental in putting together this FCB dashboard, which is fueled by over 20 spreadsheets and really is a mark of the work of about a dozen people. So many of those folks, I want to mention Melody Mack, Ashley O'Donnell, Mackenzie Nickham, Jeremy Falker, Tim Reed, Bruce Huxley, Matt Hanks, Greg Jackson, Don O'Dean, and Matt Polero. I really appreciate the time and effort these folks put into which resulted in the FCB dashboard that is public, can be publicly accessed by anybody via our website. I want to be clear about what we're discussing this evening. We're not naming schools or discussing specific criteria that will be used in the selection of schools for the superintendent's recommendation in late August. Also, any November 22 vote that we talk about tonight would impact schools no sooner than the 22-23 school year. This as superintendent, 23-24, thank you, 23-24 school year. As Superintendent Dorland said, this is the hardest work that we will do with our community. So thank you for having us here tonight. Okay. So just some framing here to see sort of where Jeffco is on the map of school districts on the Front Range. We're the second largest school district in Colorado, serving 8% of all K-12 students in the state. We have about 155 schools on 168 campuses, and our school district is divided into 17 articulation areas. So we have been seeing declining enrollment for a while. However, this is a statement from a news article from the past year, which states the effect of the pandemic on enrollment in school districts across the state. And we, as a district, saw the largest decline in population, and we lost 5,000 students between 2019 and 2022. The pandemic is not the cause of our issue, but it certainly exacerbated and accelerated it to the point where we are definitely in a situation where we must act. So what is causing the enrollment issues that we are facing? If you look at the census data, which again we've shown before, while the population has increased in the county, the population of school-aged children has decreased, and we're seeing the lowest number of births that we've seen in 15 years. This is not something that's just impacting us or our surrounding districts. This declining enrollment issue is impacting school districts around the country. We have the capacity to serve 96,000 students in our traditional district managed schools, and we currently serve 69,000 students. As Superintendent Dorland mentioned, we have 2 elementary schools that in the past 2 years have closed in the spring due to unsustainable student enrollment. Those were Allendale and Fitzmaurice. We call them off cycle because it's after round 1 of choice, which means those families did not get the opportunity to participate in round 1 of choice. While we help them with selections, ideally they would have been able to participate in the choice cycle. You all have seen these numbers before. This just shows our numbers over the past 5 years and the declines we've seen in student enrollment. And while we've certainly seen, we have hot spots for enrollment decline, this is something that is impacting impacting every single articulation area in our district. We've also talked earlier this year about the issue with our enrollments in our elementary schools and the fact that we have capacity to serve about 40,000 students at K-5 or K-6, because I do want to say we do have K-6 schools as well. And we are currently serving about 25,000. And we talk about the overwhelming number of schools that we have that are either under 250 and or have a building utilization of 60% or less. I updated this just the other day. We have been hearing from principals. I'm so thankful for the time that principals are spending looking through the reports, sending us their feedback, asking us important questions. It's so critical that our understanding of the data matches theirs, and when it doesn't, that we have conversations. And one of the misses that we had from the spring that I just want to call out was that we talked about K-5, but we didn't talk about our K-6 schools. And we do have 2 articulation areas that have K-6 schools. And we looked at the data. The data did not change much. So this slide, for example, shows the number of elementary schools and by enrollment. And so you see our schools that we have 30 schools below 250 and so on from here. And these are numbers from the 21-22 school year from October count. And then same thing here, we're looking at building utilization. So you can see that we have 10 schools that are utilizing less than 39 to 40% of their building, 22 that are utilizing between 50 and 59%, and so on. And as I said before, this is something that is impacting, the small number of students enrolled or light building utilization is affecting every single articulation area in our school district. So to be a thriving district where all students achieve their biggest dreams, we must build on our many bright spots and confront our challenges through the lens of opportunity. As Superintendent Dorland said, Regional Opportunities for Thriving Schools is an initiative that was devised in the spring of 2022 to respond to the board's request for a comprehensive plan to ensure thriving schools with an enrollment to support extraordinary student experiences across our district. I want to hand this over to Dr. Kim to talk about the important link between this work and our strategic plan.
Good evening, President Schooley and board members. Thank you for having us. You'll recall that in the spring, you all engaged in a process with many members of our team to really look at our vision, mission, and our values. And you all crafted the vision and the mission and the values that are up on the screen at this time. We know that you intend to take formal action to adopt these, but I wanted to bring us back to that to ground us in our vision being to be a thriving district where all students achieve their biggest dreams. And our mission is to provide a world-class education that prepares all Jeffco students for bright, successful futures locally and globally. From the work that you all did, we engaged not only as a cabinet team, but certainly with stakeholders, with our building leaders, with our district leaders, to really look at how do we bring Jeffco Thrives 2025 to life. And within that, we identified 4 priority areas for the work that we're going to do. Our learners, our future, our people, our strength, our operations, our foundation, and our communities, our legacy. Our people, our strength, our operations, our foundation, and our communities, our legacy are all in support of our learners, our future, which really is the foundation of the work that we're going to do. We want to make sure that we give our students the 2 goals that we've identified on the right-hand side of the screen. All Jeffco students experience a culture of instructional excellence, and all Jeffco students have extraordinary student experiences that recognize their strengths, challenge them to improve, and support them to succeed. And so we've built a lot of our work around the strategic plan, framing those 2 goals. As we began to build out those 2 goals, we recognized that in 2022, we need to lay a foundation, creating conditions to thrive. And in doing so, we recognized there were 4 major accomplishments and priorities that we really needed to accomplish in order to get to the place where we could build the foundation of our learners, our future. That includes having healthy and equitable start times, regional opportunities for thriving schools, developing a thriving and inclusive culture aligned with the district's values, and implementing a data dashboard. We recognize that by accomplishing those things, we would set ourselves up with the criteria for success in order to support our learners, our future. Creating those conditions to thrive also requires change. And in doing so, we recognize that consistency that lays a foundation for student and teacher learning means robust professional development for our staff and ensuring that our students get a culture of instructional excellence. Fewer but more robustly resourced schools. We recognize that when we adopted our budget in the, when was that? May now. It took a little bit there for a moment. Brenna Copeland, our CFO, went through the process and identified the statute that impacts our budget. And so I'll remind us, per state statute, when the district's budget utilizes fund balance to cover budget expenditures, the resolution authorizing the use of fund balance shall state that the school district's plan ensure that the use of beginning fund balance will not lead to an ongoing deficit. A plan to avoid ongoing deficit includes consolidating schools to help reduce school-based positions across all programs: administrative, instructional support, and operational. So as we look at fewer but more robustly resourced schools, we are keeping those conditions in mind as well. A culture where people not just survive, but thrive. And Jeffco 2025 is really looking at that in mind and making sure that our students and our staff have an opportunity to thrive in Jeffco. And then finally, real-time actionable data at our fingertips. You had an opportunity to catch a glimpse of what a data dashboard looks like in the FCB dashboard. Our team has really worked together for about the last 3 to 4 months looking at what could be and engaging with stakeholders to really identify what are the needs we have within the system around a data dashboard that would take all of our different sources of data, bringing them together in one system that allows us to really look at whether it's qualitative data, quantitative data, and really engage in meaningful conversations around how are our students doing, how do we know, and what does that mean we need to do to ensure that they thrive. So as we look at real-time actionable data at our fingertips, that's work we're going to do as a part of the Jeffco Thrives 2025 plan. So in looking at that moving forward, to move forward with a future where all of our elementary schools are thriving, aligned with our learners, our future, the academic leadership team identified many of the things that you see up on the screen. These are the things that are necessary in order for a school to thrive. At least one class per grade, ideally 2 teachers per grade, so that they can collaborate. Full-time supports from an instructional coach, art, music, and PE. Full-time supports from a digital teacher librarian, social emotional learning staff, equitable access to broad range of peer interactions and multiple classrooms for students to experience. You can see all of the different bullets that we've identified that we really recognize are a part of an extraordinary student experience. And I'll hand it back to Ms. Relu to continue our conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Oh, let's see. I think we're missing a slide here or two. Let's see. Okay, I apologize. I wanted to preview for everybody that we have sort of 2 types of actions that we're looking at. Urgent priority. The school is unsustainable due to severe under-enrollment, and if unaddressed in November of 2022, will likely result in an off-cycle closure in the spring of 2023. And then we have what we call high-priority runway partnerships. To increase long-term sustainability, it is recommended that 2 school communities consolidate into one thriving community in the 23-24 or 24-25 school year. And if consolidation does not occur, some schools risk closure in 1 to 2 years. I'll make sure we add that slide back in moving forward. Oh, okay. I'm not sure why. Oh, it's after this one. This is where it was. Okay. Thank you. That's what I just read. So I'll go back to the timeline. My papers are out of order, so thank you. I just want to take everyone or ground everyone in the timeline that we're looking at here in terms of our processes moving forward. So on June 30th, the board received access to a public dashboard on district-managed elementary schools providing data aligned with FCB. Receipt of this report was the first step in the process that anticipates a board vote in November of 2022. And I just want to say again, since I flubbed it the first time, that anything the board votes on in November of 2022, the earliest that anything would happen in terms of a school no longer being used in service as a school would be the 23-24 school year. A superintendent recommendation will be delivered to the board on August 25th. And schools will be named for consolidation and other related actions may be recommended. I do want to take a moment to say that we talked to our elementary school principals again yesterday. We are talking to them often. And what is becoming very clear is how distressing it has been for our small schools to have constantly been under the threat of a school closure. There have been lists and subsequent inaction that I want to say without judgment has been traumatic for our school communities. That's a fact. And today I want to apologize to those communities, especially our leaders, our principals who have dealt with this over the years. We can't change what has happened to you in the past, but we can change our approach in the future, and that's what we're looking to do. So the process of working towards a recommendation is incredibly complex. We are prioritizing clear and understandable criteria. Whenever possible, whenever we're thinking that a school might come out of service as a school, that there would be one receiving school when possible, that we're maintaining current articulations areas when possible. Again, we may not be able to stick this, but these are some things we're really trying hard to do. And then, of course, promoting extraordinary student experiences is what is guiding us in all of this work. Just to sort of start to convey what a big puzzle this is, in addition to as we look at a school, we think about if it has a center program, for example, where will that center program go that is in the best interest of the students? Sometimes we've put programs like our center programs or our preschools in places that have space without truly considering where the students live and where the program would be most convenient. So this is giving us an opportunity with Matt Palero's leadership to really look at our center programs and where they should be. Same thing with Don O'Dean and our preschool. We're really looking at where those should be. Facility capacity, of course, is another major factor, as is transportation. We're looking at natural choice patterns. So as you look at the FCB dashboard, which I definitely encourage folks in communities to do, and you see that choice out number and choice in number, we have the ability to see where students are going and where they're coming from, and we are carefully looking at that data to see if we can, in some instances, follow the patterns that are already happening. I also just want to emphasize that enrollment numbers are changing daily. We are obviously, the start of school is August 16th. And so enrollment, our enrollment secretaries are incredibly hard at work in their schools entering the information. And I am watching it very carefully several times a day. So the process of working toward a recommendation. As we shared with you all, as we've been sharing since this spring, we intended to put out an RFP for services to support us with community conversations and also to support our families who will be impacted by any decisions that are made by the board. We have contracted with Keystone Policy Center. They're local. The principal who is guiding this work and is here tonight, Barrick Abramson, is a resident of Jeffco, and we're really excited to have them on board. And they've done this work in other places, and they're going to be key to ensuring that we have the capacity we need to do this well in a way that honors and respects our families. We're also hiring a director of strategic initiatives, regional opportunities for thriving schools. This is a short-term 2-year position, and we'll focus full-time on the management of this project. I will be working in very close partnership with this person, and they will be paying specific and very specific and focused attention to the impact on school-based staff to ensure that those folks who are impacted have the information, know about the opportunities that are there for them, for those folks who are impacted. So I want to go through some milestone dates. So as I said, the superintendent recommendation will be delivered to the board on August 25th. We are very hard at work. I'm excited about a principal advisory committee that we are forming. We've asked for volunteers to support us in looking, and as we are developing the communications that will be going out to individual communities, to our larger community, they will be, those principals will be looking at things and guiding us along the way. Same thing with our community engagement. plan. Those folks will be iterating with us as we come up with the plan for community engagement. We're hoping that, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we're hoping that we will be able to share with the community before August 25th. It will be relatively close, but before August 25th, generally what our community engagement approach will be. And then on August 25th, along with the schools that are named, we will be publicizing specific dates and opportunities for people to get involved. Community conversations will be held in September and October. There's an asterisk there because some of these conversations may extend after the board vote. Public hearings, which is basically dedicated public comment on consolidations, will likely take place the week of October 24th, and we are anticipating a board vote on November 10th. This is really important to stay in line with and on track for our enrolled Jeffco timeline. We always have the opportunity, and unfortunately we had to do so this year where we had to delay our enrolled Jeffco timeline due to some security breach of websites that was happening, but it is not ideal. It once again puts us behind the ball of other districts who are getting their offers out to students and could risk having an even greater impact on our enrollment. So we are working towards that November 10th date, which is your regular November meeting. So the impact timeline in August, as I said, we're forming this elementary principal advisory committee that will be advising us. There will be community committees per policy FCB in September and October. November through August, we'll focus on student and staff transition planning and actions. And then the December 2022 through February, we will be supporting families with enrolled Jeffco, and we will work on the school decommissioning process. That means we will be figuring out all the things that it's the logistics of what needs to be moved out of a school, what to go to another building, that we will be working through those logistics in the spring, which will somewhat coincide with this next step, which is a facility use timeline. So after you all make a vote in November, we will have an RFP prepared to go out for community engagement regarding facility use. So that will be in December. In January of 2023, we're working towards having a secondary schools dashboard aligned with policy FCB. So we will be adding middle school, K-8 middle school and high schools to the FCB dashboard. And then January through May, there will be community conversations on facility use. And in February, we anticipate launching phase 2 of regional opportunities for thriving schools. And if there's any board vote that's necessary on facility use, it would likely occur in June of 2023. So that is what I have for you tonight. And I would like to hand it back to President Schooley at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Superintendent Dorland, is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation before we open it up for board members?
Nope, not at this time.
All right, board members, this is our opportunity to be able to dialogue and reflect on the information that's been presented to us in accordance with our FCB policy. Director Miller, would you mind if I pick on you to go and open up our discussion, just because I can't see you and I want to make sure you're engaged in the conversation well? Oh.
Yes, I'm engaged.
Okay, well, I wasn't trying to check on you, but would you like to begin our dialogue with any questions or comments?
Sure. So just so I draw my line with where I'm standing in terms of the consolidation and bringing schools together, and that is that I want to ensure that any of the work that we do is an uplift for all children, that there is no backstroking, and that may not be the right word, but we're not putting children into a different position and communities into a different position where they can't serve children. And so I'll give an example so we can have context of where I'm going. And that is when we closed Pleasant View a number of years back, and the children were put in different schools. And one school that was impacted was Sheldon. and Sheldon did not get the financial support that was necessary to support the children that came from Pleasant View. And so that impacted a school community, and they were not able to secure the support that was necessary to really take care of the children that were coming to them. The other part that I would raise as well is some of our kiddos, when we are starting to consolidate and think about where they're going to be, what is the connection that they have with their educational experience and the curriculum that they have been working through over the past couple of years. So, for example, if we're talking about an elementary school consolidating with another elementary school, and they've been using a different literacy program for the past 2 years, and they had another literacy program before superintendent implemented the new literacy programs, that would be a third or fourth year that they would be experiencing a different program. And I would want to make sure that we are thinking thoughtfully about how we are aligning those schools with the experiences that they're having with the curriculum so that they can continue to be successful. The third part, and I know Stephanie or Director President, you'll come back to me, but the third part truly is when we close these schools, we save about $500,000 to $600,000. We have a deficit that's running at us next year of $44 million. If we don't start thinking about beyond just closing the 13 or 14 schools or consolidating. So that is something I might put out there as a bold consideration. Are we doing enough now in time, or are we potentially kicking the can a little bit further? And then my fourth point, and then I'll stop, is because we are looking exclusively at elementary schools at this time, it potentially closes off a vision for what could be in an articulation area of a thriving pathway for students. And that is my concern, is that we are focusing so much on the elementary schools, and I understand why. Superintendent Dorland and I know we've others of us have had this conversation as well, but we're not necessarily looking down on an entire area that we might potentially sit back and say, what could be? And my concern is that when we're not doing that, we are not looking at a full pathway of a K-12 curriculum and continuum that could be beneficial to our children, and that we would have to potentially reboot or reorganize again in 3 years. And that could be disruptive. And then I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Miller. And we will have opportunities to go around several times, but thank you for getting us started. One question that I have before, and then we can continue, is there specific information that you need to hear as we move forward? Because I'm sure we all have our notes about sort of what our priorities are, our lines in the sand, where our sort of lens lies. But I want to make sure, too, that it's in service to moving forward the work that we're doing in a way that's helping to inform decision-making.
I think tonight is just the opportunity for you all to publicly share your observations. We don't need anything specifically from you for the process we're working towards in terms of a superintendent recommendation, but it's really important for us to hear your thoughts and thinking and the things that you're hearing.
Thank you. Other board members, comments, questions, thoughts about the work that we're getting ready to do or are engaged in? Yep, Dr. Barta.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to be here tonight. I think we all agree that closing schools is a pretty emotional experience. And none of us are glad to be doing this work. However, we've spent way too long not addressing what is really now a widespread district issue. I don't know, we've talked about this, if all parents understand. I know before I joined my SAC, my School Accountability Committee, and definitely more informed now on this board, how our schools are funded, and that we follow a student-based budgeting formula. So the smaller schools mean that our kids just simply get less resources and funding. And I think we just have to keep saying that so that parents understand that our decisions are largely formed around this factor that we cannot change. And we're just simply spread too thin right now. And that's resulting in these large inequities across the district. I think I was thinking about it every fall. Our parents look, at options. We've created a culture of competition here in the district, and we just simply don't know every year where our enrollment's going to land. So one thing I wanted to emphasize, because we've been getting a lot of emails from people about this topic, we're not necessarily trying to create bigger schools, because I hear a lot of folks say, like, bigger is not better, but really we're just trying to leverage our resources to create amazing schools, exceptional schools, with resources that can be combined in a way to leverage better opportunities for our kids. I was looking at the data. Most of these schools were built to serve 1.5 to 2 times as many students that are there now. And I am interested in how we can get back to the levels that bring back the opportunities and resources that exist when the schools are full, like when our schools have that many kids in them. And so we're not opposed to small schools. We just know that there's more opportunity. So I do support elementary school consolidations and mergers if it means that the students have access to more resources, if we can increase funding for them. And I just want to focus on 2 points, and then I'll stop. I wanted to call out the Yesenia Robles' recent article in Chalkbeat. And if you haven't taken a look at it, it does a very good job at looking at the data from our dashboard and summarizing it in 5 key takeaways. One of those takeaways, she points out that schools with low enrollment and utilization are also more likely to have a high concentration of students living in poverty. I think this is something that we have to call out. I think it was probably one of the most important points of that summary. These low-income schools are definitely impacted by this, and we can't really change that. We know that that's happening, but I really strongly believe that what we're doing can and should create opportunities for stronger and better school environments for our low-income families. I think this has to be at the forefront of all of our conversations and how we talk about this. And I think it's really imperative right now that we start to create a visualization and a strategy for these families and these schools for what it actually means when we say there's more resources and more opportunities. So, and what I mean by that is like building out examples that these families can understand what it means to benefit when their schools have more resources, and what it means for their kids in terms of better academic learning and long-term opportunities for their kids. So for these families, choosing out is harder. And generally, they're at schools now that are going to be impacted. So I think we want to make sure that we're giving them opportunities and creating places that they really want to choice into, that these schools that we are going to combine or build resources around are actually going to be as competitive as the schools that they could opt to choice into or may not have the opportunities to choice into. And my second point is around community feedback. I think the district knows I have some concern that our community feedback is happening after recommendations will be made in August. And I know this, we all really want to open this platform and have a place for folks to give us feedback. I think that's very sincere. And I know the timing is hard on this. But I'm hopeful that we can do this really authentically. I've mentioned this before, but my good friend, Dr. Darren Hicks, talks about what it means to have an authentic collaborative process. And he says that when people feel like decisions have been made in advance and only confirmed by the process, that it's not an authentic process. And I sincerely want to avoid any impression that decisions are being made in advance. We've had emails where people have asked, which schools are being considered. And honestly, no schools have been named or considered at this time, and I hope people understand that. But I want to make sure that we're including the voice of, I noticed we have principal committee and then even a community committee, but I don't see teachers and support staff. And maybe, I don't really know what we mean by community committee. I just want to make sure that all voices are heard, especially for the people who will be impacted, the families and kids, and also teachers. And so I worry a little bit that we're a little administrative focused on the decisions, and I want to just make sure that it's a really authentic process, because I've said it before, these folks who are impacted by this have some of the best ideas for how to do this process and solutions that are coming up. And I know this is it will be emotional and hard, but listening is a healer. So I think it's just an important thing that we not just tick off, but do really well. And then lastly, I just wanted to note there have been some things that parents have already said are special concerns for them, like special programs. You mentioned it, Lisa, as a concern for parents. Questions like, will they still be available? One parent asked, will we create too much competition and combination of schools so their programs will be hard to get into and their students suddenly won't have them available? So that we've had lots of questions about capital improvement projects. What about all these schools that just had improvements, and how can we explain to voters that approved capital funds about what's happening and why? But I also have heard, and I think this is where we get innovation, people are asking what opportunities are there and what we've done and invested in for the future of our district. And lots of questions about classroom size. If we combine schools, are classrooms going to be too big? So I just want to make sure that and lastly, a lot of people talk about their school community and the connections and the short walk to school and things like that. So I'm wondering, how are we going to continue to have a culture of connection during the process? And can we ensure that kids will be welcomed in their new schools, that parents will understand the process and feel supported? So those were the main things that I've been hearing and thinking about and that are priorities. I know that waiting and wondering is very hard. I even think about it for my own family. And I have a lot of empathy for the families right now that are just wondering what's next. So I appreciate the opportunity to meet and have a long process, as long as we can, multiple meetings to hear back from the public.
Thank you, Director Barta. Other board members? Yep. Director Reed.
So the first thing that I want to say is thank you to the people who assembled the dashboard. I have spent a lot of time looking at it, and I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was just how many moving pieces there are to this. And so I also want to thank in advance the people who are going to be figuring out how to make all the gears work and make this come together. And so, in a way, to address what Dr. Varda was talking about, it can be difficult because when you're trying to gather that community input, on the one hand, if you don't have a starting point, like this is, these are kind of the schools that we're looking at and these are the changes that we're looking at, then we don't know what we're discussing. And if we go with those right away, then there's a feeling of, so the decision's already been made. Why are you even bothering to ask us this question? And so I think it's important for all of us to really think about this in terms of there are so many moving pieces. And I've had tons of letters from people who love their neighborhood school, and I am a passionate supporter of neighborhood schools. So I really appreciate that. And I'm so glad that they love their neighborhood school in that sense of community. And there are so many other pieces that are being taken into account. So I have people asking, are you looking at articulation areas? Yes, we are. Are you looking at transportation? Yes, we are. Are you looking at the programs that are used? Yes, we're looking at all of this. So please understand that when we do finally come together with a list to consider, all of those pieces go into that. And we may have our own things that we're passionate about, but whatever it is, it's one of the moving pieces. And so I'm going to talk about the piece that I'm really passionate about. And that is that I come at everything as an educator. And instructional excellence is really important to me. So I look at the span of my career, and I don't know what I would have become as a teacher without the veterans who mentored me. And so to have a school that is so small that there's no one to mentor new teachers when we have a turnover happening in our teachers, really the kids pay the price for that, because what you have are inexperienced teachers with very little guidance. And even over the span of my career, when I became a 25 and 26-year teacher, I also gained so much from the new teachers who came in and who opened my eyes to a different way of looking at things, or who were moving along with culture at a faster rate than I was necessarily, and who could make me see things through the lens of change that was happening. And so I'm profoundly grateful to the young teachers that I worked with and my fellow veteran teachers who, I could bounce ideas off of, and they still made me a better teacher. By year 30, my colleagues were still making me a better teacher. And so to me, to have a school where you've got possibly a brand new teacher teaching a combination 1-2 classroom, and I taught elementary for a semester, you are teaching 3 different levels of math, multiple levels of reading. You're trying to juggle social studies and science. And you've got all of these different things. And now you've got to do it for first and second grade. And you're a second-year teacher. You can't tell me that the kids don't pay for that. That teacher can be putting her heart and soul and 80 hours a week into that job. And those kids are not getting the instruction they would get if that teacher had colleagues to help them along the way. And if we didn't have teachers splitting grades. And so my hope is that people will understand that it is not just about being a bigger school, that we're not saying bigger is better, but we are saying that there comes a point where you start to reach diminishing returns. Yes, a small class size is really a wonderful thing until you get to a certain point. And then the kids don't feed each other's ideas anymore. The class is too small. And you don't get the energy and the passion and the enthusiasm that happens when you have a rich and diverse group of students in the same room together. So there really are so many benefits that I think people don't automatically see. What they see first is that warmth, that community, that sense of my child is known, and these things are all very important. I don't think you lose that. I mean, having taught at a high school that at one point topped out at 2,000 students, and yet, what would be the first word that people would have used to describe that school? Family. So you can have that. So I'm hoping that at least maybe puts some sense of ease for some parents. Hearing this from an educator who has experienced school culture and who believes that school culture is really important. So those are the elements that I think are critical, and I do hope that our entire district understands that we are looking at all the moving pieces and that no single one of us has them all. So, and thank you again to those of you who are putting it all together.
Thank you. Director Parker, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who worked on the dashboard. It's amazing, and I think that Jeffco can be a model now because, as has been said many times, we're not the only district in the state or in the country that is facing this problem. So I think that we've got a great handle on that part of it. The evaluation of what is existing right now. I did want to make one point about the dashboard. I know that you said it's being updated because the enrollment's updating. Another thing that has been brought up that I've seen mentioned is the FCI, the Facility Cost Index. And I'm looking right now, for instance, Marshdale. Marshdale has a whole new school coming. And the statistics here are based on the existing old school, if you will. And it shows all the bond money that went into the school. And then it shows FCI of 30% that doesn't really match what it's going to be. So anyway, just either put a asterisk somewhere or say when this data was collected, and it might be helpful. Also wanted to make one little point on your slide number 7. This is something, it has to do with charter schools. And I know we are not dealing with charter schools now, but there is the question of how what we're doing could or would affect charter schools. And that slide 7, in my mind, when I first looked at it, it looked as if the charter schools were sort of hanging in there and that they were a bigger portion of our district than they really are, because it's about 10%. And it's because the bottom line doesn't start at 0. You know, it goes from some middle level. So it's just a comment on that could maybe make it a little more clearer. But I did want to just anticipate in the future if what we're doing today in consolidating schools, closing schools, will in the future have any impact on charter schools when they come up for renewal. I don't know if it will be put into the equation that we're still over. We have more seats than students. Would it come up in our deliberation of renewals of charters or not? Because oftentimes those decisions are based on funding and other things. And so I'm not asking for an answer, but just something to think about. I also was wondering if you'd done any work on, and I hate to ask for more work, but if you were just start from scratch, if you just had pure demographics of how many school-age kids are in a certain area of Jefferson County, and then decided, oh, this is where we should put a school because there's this, population. So if you were able to do something simple like that and then overlay it on what we have right now and then kind of see what it would look like, because I think we've done a wonderful job in putting out there, identifying what is existing. But the next question is, what will it look like after we have closed some of these schools? Will we have a glaring hole and there's a community that's the population is aging, but it'll turn over sometime in the future, and then all of a sudden we might have a lot of school-age kids with no, close place, no neighborhood school for them. Also, a question about the center programs. I know that there's been a lot of input on those, but a question I have is if a school is closed that has a center program, I imagine we could do two things. One is move that program to another school, or we could move the students, encourage them to go to another program that may have room for them. But again, to be aware of location, geography, because we don't want those families to have to go clear to the other end of the district to get the services their kids need. Another question kind of has to do with the next level. We've done a great job of showing what exists now. But if we could get more information from parents, maybe a survey of them on why they chose the school they chose. We did that a little bit with the start time survey we gave, and we know that people chose schools because of start times. But if we get a good handle on why, and I guess it's not just the schools that are low enrollment, it's schools that are high enrollment too. Why did parents choose that school? And then what would they use to choose if their current school was closed? What would they use as their decision? Because I appreciate the idea of trying to move them to one school, one receiving school, and you could have that orientation and the kids can move with their friends. But if the parents have another reason for choosing schools, then our assumptions may not pan out. We might end up with some enrollment challenges for 23-24. But anyway, overall, I am so proud of the work that the district has done. And as I said, we're not alone in this. And I think we're leading the way, at least in being transparent and being very clear what the criteria is that we'll be making our decisions on.
Thank you, Director Parker. I just have a few comments to share, and then we can go back around to make sure everyone has had ample opportunity for commenting or putting questions out there. The first thing I'll say, Ms. Rulu, I really appreciated that you included in your opening remarks, not that you were here during the time, so it's not really your apology, but a recognition of the unintended consequences of going through and a sort of aborted process of naming schools potentially to close, going through all of the conversations and dialogue. They do or do not close, and it does damage because it was not attended to in a way that was really focused on students. In the past, and I say this having some personal experience around this process in communities in which I am affiliated, meaning I live there, and the focus has been in the past, sometimes it's solely based on facilities, sometimes it may be based around academic achievement or growth, without having a sort of more holistic look at what is it that makes a thriving school, how are we defining that? It's all of those things. And so this process of weaving together, which makes everything much more complicated and muddy and accurate, because that is life. I appreciate greatly the recognition that we do not want to do harm, and we want to be thoughtful and really intentionally shift to make sure that our learners, our future, and the value around the student focus being the all-important why for why we're sitting here in this room together remains at the forefront. So when we think about things like, and we've heard some other board members discuss this, what is the impact of split grade classrooms on our students? What is the impact of not having full-time art, music, PE on our students? What is the impact of not having before and after care for our students? And what is the impact when students don't have peer groups with whom they can learn and grow? All of those things are so critically important because we are maintaining a focus on students. So thank you for the recognition. I think it does a lot more harm if we just sit here and pretend like it didn't have some consequences in the past, as we hopefully move forward in a better way. The other things that I'd like to bring up, one is, and this has been mentioned, the notion that our communities are ecosystems of public education. So we have schools, individual schools that we talk about, but none of those live in isolation from one another. There are students that choice in and out and cross boundary lines from one school to the next. Transportation, I don't even know how transportation does it, but is trying to follow these patterns of how we get students back and forth. But that focus around there are downstream impacts if we consolidate or close, which is another question I have about what the difference between those two things are. A school that has downstream impacts for that ecosystem. And I am very interested in continuing to talk about what we need to be attentive to, and whether that is, as Director Miller said, thinking about, well, this is going to impact middle and high schools then, as we think about how that looks for phase 2, or this is going to impact perhaps communities in which there are developments that then may have an influx of students. So how are we thinking about that ecosystem in a way that is, one, following data, but also, again, with a real strong lens around where our students are going to thrive. The second piece, or maybe the fifth by this time, but goes back to a little bit of what Dr. Varder was speaking of around our title schools. So one, there's a recognition, and this is by no means is it a direct correlation of small school, title school at all. However, there are higher numbers of free and reduced, higher percentages of free and reduced lunch students at a lot of our smaller schools. My strong desire in this is to avoid thinking of it as just moving that population of students into a more affluent school without any sort of real thought and care around what that transition looks like, and or being open to conversations around what is the building that's going to best provide some of our students the experience we want them to have consistently, and not make assumptions that it's just one school immediately into another. For one, is because of care of students. I want to make sure that, for example, if we had a school receiving title funds, they no longer perhaps receive title funds as a consolidated school. You still have students that have needs. And so how are we going to then think about the resourcing and support of those students, which is part of the intention of this whole process, I understand. I just feel the need to say out loud that it's not absorbing a culture of a school, that we build a new culture. It's a new school at that point. And how do we do that with intention? And then the last piece I will say is on the slide that discussed the high priority runway partnerships. I think I am troubled's not the right word. I want to be careful about having principals make decisions around consolidations and closures, and having school leadership be in a role where that's well beyond sense making. That's creating something completely new and different. And while I think that can, obviously we need all voices in the room for that conversation around what could some of those partnerships look like. I don't by any stretch want to make sure that principals aren't feeling like they're the ones that need to lead that process, because that is not their job. And they will take care of their communities because they're awesome. But I want to make sure that that's not the focus of where those partnerships are coming from. So I'm going to pause there. And I don't know if you all we're just like throwing information at you. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything along the way. So I apologize for not taking breaks here. But I'll open it up and let me know if you want to jump in, Superintendent Dorland, and then we can see if Director Miller wants to start us off around again.
Sure. I do want to say a few things. I have some things highlighted, and just to give you some thoughts from my seat. First, I want to hand it over to Lisa to talk about the runway, the difference between the runway schools and the urgent priority schools. For me, the main difference is timeline, and making sure that we're, as I've said before, smarter tomorrow than we are today, because we're smarter today than we were yesterday. And so if we can get ahead of this more than our district has in the past, it's a real benefit to communities, in my opinion. And so the runway opportunities is actually an opportunity to get ahead of it even further than the urgent priority schools. But I would like Lisa to just share a little bit about the role of the principals in the runway partnerships, because we completely agree with you. We do not want to leave our principals in a spot where this is sitting on their shoulders when they're also trying to have a really good year for kids in terms of just having a good school year.
So I want to say that I'm so glad Dr. Varda brought up the fact that great ideas come from all corners of our community. And Dr. Varda, you've said that before. And at the beginning of the summer, before school was out, we met with all the elementary school principals, and we asked them, do you have ideas? Please bring those to us. And those ideas have been have figured somewhat into our this whole big puzzle we're looking at, but they have to make sense. I think, as Director Miller has said before, they have to make sense from the district perspective. We have the whole picture, and we have to understand how they fit in. So, but it's certainly been helpful, and every idea has made us think. But we are certainly, and our team who's looking at the data and looking at all the programs, we're driving that work, and we will be supporting our principals as we go forward with that. So I think it's important. Their role is so important, and their ideas have been important, and ideas have come from all places. People have ideas about other schools than their own, and so that's been great. But it's just figuring into the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, as we've thought about the ideas that have come to us, we bring it back, and thank you all for acknowledging the puzzle that we're dealing with, because an idea comes forward, we think, oh, that's a really good idea. We come back to the table, and for one reason or another, it doesn't work. And so, that's been challenging. But our principals, we see our principals as partners in this work and not necessarily the primary leaders. And I want to talk about leadership for a minute because I couldn't agree more with Dr. Varda's comments about authentic engagement. And I talked at the beginning about leading this work with intention, with grace, and with presence with our people, right? The people we serve, our community, and support for our families and staff. And I really do believe in all of those things. And I genuinely want to do this work in that way. At the same time, we've talked quite a bit with our leaders over the last 4 days as we've had our leadership launch, which, by the way, has gone very well. And I'm very excited to share more with you about that at some point when it's appropriate. But we talked a lot about truth and hope, and this mindset of clear is kind. And I'm all about talking to people about their ideas, how they feel about different decisions that I'm either making or recommendations that I'm making to the board for decision making. And at the same time, we have let this situation in Jeffco get to a point where I don't believe we have the luxury of time if we do want to avoid emergency closures going forward. I don't believe we have the luxury for asking 85 different school communities how they feel about their school being considered or what ideas they have for what facility might be best in a certain area. Because honestly, if we're going to be clear and kind with our community and lead with courage, we are in a situation where we have urgent priority schools. We have schools with grade levels that are combined and kids not getting what they need in math. And our data will show us that. And we'll have a lot of time in August to talk about that. We have schools where we have teachers who are not thriving to their best selves and their best professional decision-making and practice and growth opportunities because they're all by themselves. We have our ESPs and our office staff who are wearing 5 hats in one day. Even though they were hired to be a special ed para, they're having to do 4 other things because we can't get the right resources in a building to make sure that somebody else can do those other things. We have secretaries who serve as health aides. And it compromises then our data sets because we don't have the time we need with our employees to make sure that we can focus on data integrity and give them the time they need to input it. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And I do believe in authentic community engagement, but I also believe in courageous leadership that doesn't pretend like people have a choice when they don't. And we really just don't have a choice right now other than to tackle this. And I believe that the right approach for now, especially for our urgent priority schools, is to just be clear and follow it with kindness and support. And I believe our engagement process, as we're working on it with an external partner, I'm very grateful for a partnership from an organization who has an outside lens and can support us with how have other communities done this well. I believe that we're going to get the engagement part right around how do we support people through it? Because the only way out is through. And right now, we have a situation facing us where we don't have the luxury for a lot of time, and we don't have the luxury of being able to say to people, what do you think? Because we've run out of time. And the puzzle is so big that everybody's idea could take us another, honestly, decade to analyze. And we have to stop analyzing, and we have to stop being paralyzed by that analysis, and we have to make some really courageous decisions. And it's going to be hard, but as somebody who cares a lot about this community, who grew up in this community, whose kids are here, who's I hope my grandchildren, and I'm a grandparent someday, are here. I feel strongly that the right thing to do is to make some announcements and make some tough decisions, and follow that up side by side with our community, taking care of them through the process. And so, in my mind, that is authentic, and it is honest, and it is courageous. And I'll say again that I appreciate the board having the courage to ask me to take this on in a way that honors our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Dorland. So I'm going to open it back up for board members if there's anything that has occurred to you during our dialogue, or any kind of concluding thoughts. Director Miller, do you have anything else you'd like to add to the conversation?
I'd like to go not first. Director Schooley, I'd like to kind of pause and think about what Superintendent Dorland just said, and then I'll chime back in.
Sounds great. Thank you. Other board members, comments, questions as this work moves forward?
Maybe as people are thinking, I will also just address some of the feedback that Board Member Miller mentioned around, are we going to do this in a way this time around that hinders us from taking advantage of opportunities at a broader scale, like in an articulation area, for example, and re-envisioning alongside the community or a specific community what it could look like and what that community wants for their students from a K-12 perspective. I think that is the ideal way to do this work. And we mentioned when Ms. Rilou presented that we will start phase 2. And I do believe, again, if we can get ahead of this, and it's sort of this like urgent priority. Next comes this runway partnership opportunities that we may take action on, and they may not happen until 24, 25. I think phase 2 is also going to contemplate what Director Miller keeps talking to me about, which is we need to talk about broader regions. We need to talk about the K-12 continuum. And I agree. We also only have capacity to do this in a way as supportive as you've asked me to do it, to do so much at once. And because our district has allowed this to linger and get to a point where we have urgent priority needs, we have to be able to take it from a tiered approach and address the most urgent needs now, while at the same time, by doing so, I believe positioning ourselves in a better way to do it better and better and better as we move forward. And so in phase 2, I am very hopeful for the opportunity to talk about a region or 2 or 3, we haven't contemplated that yet, maybe by articulation area, and to do more authentic engagement around what are people's ideas. What does the community really want for its students from a K-12 experience? And I think the more we dig in, the more we can get done now by November, the more time we'll have for more meaningful engagement on the front end instead of just the support end after decisions are made.
Thank you, Superintendent Dorland. One of the things that brings to mind for me as we're moving forward, and this is a balance point I'd like to find. We have some communities that already have been impacted more than once from the emergency school closures. And we've talked to those parents as we've gone through the process of community and parent engagement, and it's not okay that we continue a cycle that's impacting some pretty select communities over and over again. So as we think about how are we defining articulation areas or boundaries for homeschools and really creating robust experiences for students that we are anticipating, how we can create those within a community and not then have them be back in front of the board or in a list somewhere in some future date, if we can control it, because it's not a good way to move forward. Yep, Director Reed.
So I want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page in our understanding of what community feedback is at this point. So that, because we're all going to be engaging with our communities about this, and so that we're delivering a consistent message. And perhaps, if people are watching right now, to sort of give them a better understanding of what that means. Because I do think that people come to it with the assumption that if you are asking for my feedback, I have the ability to change the direction. And so to perhaps be very clear that that's really not what we're talking about. That what we're talking about is having genuine and authentic input into how this is accomplished and if your community is impacted. What do you need? Not what do you want, because you don't always get what you want. But as Mick Jagger wisely told us, if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need. And so, what do you need from the district to help this be a great thing for your family and for your children? Because we know that it can be. So I think just sort of making clear from the get-go that there are probably going to be certain aspects of this in terms of direction that can't be changed because of all these moving pieces that we just talked about. Because as a parent, I see my child's school, my child's involvement, my child's teacher, and I don't see all of the things in the articulation area and all of the aspects of centers that my child's not involved in, or transportation, or, so we just need to be able to say to people, you don't have all the pieces. We do have people who are paid really well because they have expertise in this, and we're going to listen to those voices, but you are the experts on your community. So we want to hear from you about how we can make this work in your community. And I think if we're all kind of on that same page, and so that we're not setting up a set of expectations that really doesn't work with the process. Does that make sense?
Yep, Director Barta.
Thank you. I think that was really helpful. And I think that's spot on. And another place that we can really take that kind of input is in building solutions. Not on the decisions as much of this complexity and this puzzle of how it happens, but, innovation will really come when we probe and from like a user design experience, and I build technology, and I have a very smart VP of product who always gently reminds me that maybe the idea that I had in my head about how this thing should look at the end might not be right. And we try to work with our users to see if they can help guide us into that solution space. So I think in terms of if we look ahead, if we take the long view on this and a real systems lens, we'll see that there's a decision of to consolidate or not, but then there's this opportunity that's going to open. And what does that school look, I know we keep saying leveraging resources and bringing things together, but what does that mean actually? And does it actually mean a better arts program or, better technology in that school? And I think the way that those things get implemented is going to take a long time to figure out. We're not going to see instantly better schools, but it'll be really great, I think, to engage people as we go through that process and how we can make that a reality, especially in our schools that are in our communities that have already been impacted. So I think I just wanted to take it a step further to say that feedback needs to come not just now, but in the years to come as we implement innovation and solutions inside these schools.
Anyone else to provide comments? Director Miller, Director Parker?
I would like to chime in at this point. So I want to go back to, if we could, the conversation back in November when we had Dr. Aquino join us and talk to us about how Jeffco has a plethora of data and how do we use it thoughtfully for students. And Stephanie, as you know, and I'm sure others, Director Reed, you lived through it as well. We moved our sixth graders from our elementary schools a number of years ago to our middle schools because we wanted to make sure that the experience was not just transitory for kiddos to move from sixth grade to seventh and then out in 2 years. And we didn't think thoughtfully about what that implication was going to be for our schools that served the K-6s. It was done because we wanted to ensure that our middle schools stayed full, or that we had the right number of kiddos in our middle schools. And my ask is that we have this great database that everybody put together, and I appreciate it tremendously, what you all did, because it does give transparency to our communities as to understanding really what the challenges are. Like, what does it cost to operate this facility at this level of enrollment? What does it look like in terms of the number of kiddos that we're serving? What are, candidly, their academic outcomes? How many of our children exceed or don't exceed math and English and language arts because of how we are structured? How much money have we invested in our schools, and what the potentials could be for the experiences that our children could have? And I think, Ms. LaRue, you and I both sat through the Jeffco Jeffco articulation area last week. And my ask there, and I'll repeat it here, and I know, Superintendent Dorland, we do have a sense of urgency. We have 44 schools or more that are less than 70% utilized. And in the world I work in, that's not okay. But I do want to be thinking about, what is it? I know we have a certain urgency with the number of students or schools that we have to be looking at right now. But we do have to be looking at the data overall that says we are serving 1,500 children in this articulation area. We're serving 4,000 children in this articulation area. We're serving 3,000 children in this articulation area. As Dr. Parker, or as Director Parker said, what does it look like for us to serve those children in that articulation area? And how do we serve them? And so the sense of urgency and moving fast, and I understand why we're doing it, but there are implications that we need to also be thinking about that we missed 7 years ago when we moved our sixth graders to our middle schools. We missed it. We didn't talk about it. And I don't want to repeat that, and I want to honor what Dr. Kino and Deliver Ed told us 5 years ago about using data thoughtfully and carefully so that we are making well-informed decisions that are beneficial to our children and our families and community, but focusing on what is best for our children through their K-12 continuum. And I really appreciated Jeffco articulation, the Jefferson articulation area coming together and having a vision. We're not about facilities. We're about children and how best are we serving our kids in our communities. And I'm not trying to punt the ball. I'm not trying to kick it, but I want to make this a productive conversation tonight. We've gone through all this information. You've provided the data. Now what? And how are we thinking about how we will serve our articulation areas thoughtfully? Why are 5,000 people leaving us, or children leaving us every year? How do we keep them here? And understanding, why are people choicing out and choicing in? Like Director Parker said, why are people making these decisions? So that we can have long-range plans. I understand the immediacy of the next 12 months. But if we're going to have our community trust us and buy into the long term, we have to be using the information we have to making those decisions with the community to serve those children that are in those articulation areas. And that's what I would like to bring forward this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Miller. Other questions or comments at this juncture of our dialogue around regional opportunities for thriving schools? Director Parker?
I hate to bring up something else that's, well, anyway, I will. It goes along with what Director Miller just said. The articulation areas, in my opinion, have really gotten out of whack over the years. And I know that it's a big project to try and change them, and I know they've been discussed in the past, and there's been a lot of upheaval in communities who had planned for their kids, for their progress. But it does occur to me when I look at the schools in my district and I try to imagine what a receiving school would be, which one makes the most sense. And then all of a sudden I realized, wow, it doesn't make any sense for this school to be in this articulation area anyway. Like, why is it there? It makes more sense for it to go with this school that's just a mile away. But that's a different articulation area. So I know this complicates things a lot, but I don't want kids to move to a new school, and then in phase 2 is when we address articulation areas, and we say, so yeah, all of a sudden this school is not going where you thought they were going to go. So I don't know if there's any thought to changing that.
So as part of what we recommend, or what the superintendent recommends in August, we do anticipate asking the board to consider looking at boundaries, articulation areas in terms of a study that could happen going into 2023. But it needs to be done in a modern way that looks at how the students are choicing and moving around, and not just what we have now. So it is something that we know that we need to look at, and we are going to be talking with the board more about that.
And I would add that I think your comments about articulation areas, the K-12 experience, just my own experience as a parent and community member with choice and with friends and family who've choiced. Director Parker, your comments about why are people choosing? What are the primary reasons? We have some information about that, not a lot. We're working to make sure we can get all the information we have about that, and then consider what does it, we are a 46% choice, 44% of our families choice out of their boundary school. I mean, that data in and of itself is interesting and something that I want to learn a lot more about. And so this notion of boundary, articulation area, choice patterns, which really to me is like, what do families want? And then that leads me to have a lot of questions about programming and what programs do we have where that are serving families in a way that they want to be served and that are allowing our kids to have experiences that they are passionate about. Where do we have vacuums where those programs don't exist and families are looking for them, but we're not offering them, is another conversation that we've had in terms of better understanding as we lean into, as Director Miller said, a broader articulation area and or just region conversation and decision making. My best hope is that through phase 1 here, we can take care of the urgent needs, get some schools that might be urgent the next year into conversation so that the engagement can be even better tomorrow than it is today for families and staff, and then also begin this broader, more strategic conversation. It's a tough balance, right? It's a tough balance to get those urgent pieces taken care of while at the same time having that broader and longer term look with so many of these larger scale puzzle pieces like programming, boundaries, choice patterns. But we are thinking about that and hoping that in August we're also able to talk to you about our best thinking for how we might do some work to set us up for success with that broader conversation.
Great, thank you. And just as a reminder for folks, this is really the board's first sort of opportunity to dialogue about the data that, according to policy, has been brought in front of us by district leadership, and will sort of help, I think, frame some of the priorities and areas that, as board members, will be looking for as we move forward with the superintendent's recommendation. I want to make sure, though, that we have sort of those perspectives out there, as many as need to be, as we begin these conversations. This is not the only time we will be talking about this. Yep, Director Barta.
Well, I was thinking, one thing I'm really grateful for, and I think it shows here tonight, is how united we are as a board in thinking about this. And I know some people will post and try to paint a picture that we have division around this topic. And I think it's really important that the public know that this is something that I think the five of us really agree on and that we are really committed to working together on. So I don't really know where that leaves us, but I just know it's coming. The effort to paint this, that it's a divisive thing in our community. And I hope people will see that it's something that really is a collaborative effort across many different perspectives and stakeholders. And I think we need to continue that tone and that purpose so that we can have the outcome that we need for our kids. So I just wanted to highlight that tonight.
Thanks, Director Barta. Okay, Director Miller, any last or concluding remarks since I can't see you, to make sure you've said what you would like to put on that table?
No, I think people have been forthcoming with their priorities and their areas of focus. I think we have a lot of thinking to do as a board and a lot of work to do as a board with our communities. And we recognize that come August, there will be suggestions about, moving forward from Superintendent Dorland and her team, and that we need as a board, as Dr. Barta just said, to be participatory and engaged and united with talking with our communities and being a part of the conversation, because as you know, President Stephanie, that we don't want it to be done to us. We want to be a part of the conversation. And I think, President Schooley, you've been through that, and we really need to be there for our communities and be listening to their voices so they have a part in that conversation and not have it feel as if they were not engaged from the very beginning. So that's where I stand. I want to be a part of the conversation with our community. So thank you for the opportunity tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, Director Parker.
I just wanted to say that closing schools obviously is a very hard thing, but in one respect, it was easy to prioritize this. As a new board member, there were so many things that I personally had identified as priorities for me, things I wanted to get done in my term here. But there's no doubt that our school situation and the quality of the education we're able to provide for our kids is the number one priority. So I'm very glad that we've got all hands on deck and have so many people helping us with this most urgent priority.
Great. So what I have heard tonight, my takeaway, and I'm sure there are lots of notes scribbled down on various tablets and pieces of scrap paper, which is what I use. I hear a lot of shared interest from the board around the student learning experience and what we are sort of aspiration for that, how we get to the point where we can innovate and design what's best for students. A lot of interest around how we're supporting community members and parents, how we listen and engage in a way that is thoughtful and brings those voices, whether it's district staff, parents of the school, community members that live in these neighborhoods, that we can appreciate and build on. Attention to the demographics of our students and how we're impacting and supporting those students as we move forward. And then attention to how this sort of downstream effects of any consolidation or closure needs to be thoughtful in terms of both articulation areas and how those boundaries and borders look and function, but also middle school, high school, what does that transition look like for our students as they move forward? There were more, but I feel like there's a strong set of shared interests around those items that I'm sure we'll see reflected in recommendations as they are crafted and come back to the board. So with that, unless somebody interrupts me, which you can do if you've got a last comment, thank you very much for your work. Thanks to your teams that have brought a lot of this data in front of us. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.